Hi, I'm Sylvia Yu, and welcome to my show, Inspiring You with Sylvia Yu. I'm very honored to welcome Sandy Biback. She is a legend and inspires devotion in many people, especially women. And she is the founder of Meeting Professionals Against Human Trafficking. She has won huge awards, including this amazing industry award, the prestigious Event Industry Council's Hall of Leaders. She is a leader, a mentor, an owner of a consulting firm, and she has taught in colleges about hospitality and other subjects. So welcome, Sandy. Thank you so much. I'm a fan of yours, and it's great to have you.
Thank you. I'm really pleased to be here. Thank you.
So Sandy, let's jump right into it. What have been the two or three major milestones in your life that has shaped you as a professional and as a leader?
First one is marrying my husband. We got married very young, and he will be married 54, 55 years in September.
Congratulations.
And yeah, and he has supported me through everything. We're very different people. It's his support that has helped me along the way.
Mhm.
I was really thinking of that. And the other one was when I decided to go out on my own and open up my own consulting firm, planning conferences and events. And I got tired of the corporate speak. I got tired of being told, no, this is the way it's done. So I felt that it was inhibiting my creativity. And I felt I could do better for different clients. And I did that in 1990. And I was successful, whatever success means to different people. And I think the last thing was forming MPAHT, Meeting Professionals Against Human Trafficking, which will be 6 years old in April. Never in my wildest dreams did I ever think I would ever do something like that.
Yeah, wow. And you were an early pioneer. I think you had mentioned that in one of our previous conversations. Can you tell us about how you overcame certain obstacles? I mean, what were the challenges that you faced, and how did you overcome?
I'm stubborn. Um, and
And
I,
wildly funny, if I may add. You're
oh, thank you.
hilarious, Sandy.
Um, I think for me, and I think a good friend of mine said this to me one day. He said, we all have challenges and we all have opportunities. So when something gets in my way, I don't look at it as something in my way. I say, okay, what's the opportunity? How can I work around it? What's the workaround? And you know what? Sometimes you just don't find it. And so you have to say, okay, we're done. But I think that's the biggest thing, is that I've always looked for a different answer. And don't tell me you can't do it that way, because, or that it's never been done like that, or that it's always been done, because we live in different times and we don't have to go any further than the last 3.5 years.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that's really important, to look at other ways, talk to other people. I don't do this alone, and sometimes I'm wrong. I also believe in brainstorming. I believe in shooting for the moon, and if you only get a half moon versus a full moon, better than nothing.
Mm. So, who has inspired you over the years? Does anyone stand out? Who or what?
Yeah.
What has inspired you,
Or
Sandy?
what? Travel has inspired me. It's my um I always loved to travel and never had as much money to travel as I do now, fortunately. And it is like, okay, so what's your next plan? Like, I'm already planning, in the midst of planning 3 more trips, having just
Oh, wow.
gotten back from the 1st of November. Um, it opens up my life. It's actually where the seeds for MPAHT was started.
Mm.
And I just travel inspires me. It's
Any,
people,
mm.
it's the people I've met along the way. And I'm not just talking about fellow travelers. I'm talking about the people in the countries I've been to.
Yeah. Have you had
Um,
any mentors who inspired you over the
yes.
years? And yeah, tell me about these important.
My friend Robert that I just mentioned before,
Mm,
he's part owner of an audiovisual company, but when he first started, he was a salesperson in that company, and he was my salesperson. And we've become good friends, but he challenges people. He's been through his own stuff that he's worked through. He's wildly successful. He's an absolutely wonderful human being. And he continues to be a human being. The other person is Joan Eisenstadt,
mm,
and I think about her all the time. She lives in Washington. She is in our industry. She is a forerunner, the same as I am. She's been around a little longer than me.
mm,
But I was thinking a lot about that today, Sylvia, about why she inspires me. She is the moral compass of our industry. So
yeah.
it's not about it's certainly about being able to do her job. And she consults with a lot of clients now on legal things, and particularly DEI and accessibility. But she's always been there when there's been something that says, hey, industry, you need to get on board with this.
Mm,
And yeah, she's a total inspiration for me.
yeah. So, Sandy, what makes you such an amazing connector? How would you describe that? I mean, I do believe that's your superpower, and you do inspire unusual devotion in the people who know you. And I mean, you're legendary. People speak so highly of you, and they call you, their mentor, and you've had a deep impact. Why do you think that is? And how does one become a person of influence and a connector like you?
I didn't set out to do this by any stretch of the imagination. Um, I found when I was teaching um, that it was very important for the students to understand that planning a conference or working in a hotel was much more than a job. And I would get to know my students. And all the profs, and I was part-time. I mean, I was part-time faculty. Again, it's that red tape that I hate. And students would say, hey, can I talk to you about something? Well, I never met in my office. We always went out for coffee because we were then on an even base. It was person to person. And I have a lot of my grad students floating around there right now, and I'm so proud of so many of them. And sometimes they just crop up out of the nowhere. About a year ago, I had an email from a former student, Naveed, and he said he's written a book on sales. He's really a salesperson. And he said in the foreword, he thanked me and he wanted me to know that as
Oh,
one of his profs. And I went, okay. And it all goes back to something I said to him in a class. He came from a very black, white background where, there was no gray in the world. Well, our industry is all gray. And I said, you need to start looking at the gray. And that stuck with him.
oh,
And that's what he thanked me for in his book. And I was like, I was crying, and um, and I think for me, it's not, you talked about mentoring. It's nothing that's formal. It
mm,
just kind of is very organic. And it's just organic. But
yeah.
more than that, I get mentored
Oh,
because
yeah.
I
You learn
learn
so
from
much. You
them.
benefit. Yes.
I mean, the things I've learned from some of my
Oh, yeah.
people that I've worked with, and then it's about, I remember when one of my former students who's still in the business,
Mm.
and her daughter is now about 13 or 14. And I remember when Rachel told me she was pregnant, and I went, oh my God, I'm going to be a grandmother. And that's kind of how I felt, although I already had my own grandson. But
Yeah.
it's a two-way street.
Oh,
And if I can help somebody, I know that somewhere down the road, they're going to help me if I need it.
yeah. So
And
you need
it's that simple.
so you need a big heart and a caring attitude. What kind of advice would you tell others who are seeking a mentor?
Be prepared to give something back. I
Mm,
really believe that. Don't just take, take, take. It's kind of like sponsorship. If all you want is their money or whatever it is they're going to give you, that's the wrong attitude. But if you're willing to give something back to them, and I'm not talking about a sign, that's where the relationship starts. And I think if you're looking for a mentor, look for somebody, not necessarily in the business you're in, um, or the business you want to go in, but talk to people, ask them. I get asked all the time, who can I talk to? And I'll almost try and fit them in with people that I know who they could benefit from talking with. Um, and that's not everybody all the time. I guess I get to know the people, and if you're looking for a mentor, get to know them.
mhm,
Um, not only for what they can do for you, but what you can do for them.
mhm, mhm.
It's
Important
that simple.
advice. Important advice. So, Sandy, tell me about the meeting Professionals Against Human Trafficking. How did it blossom?
Um, I was in Cambodia for the first time in 2018, I guess,
Mhm.
3 5, or maybe it's 2017. And we were in Phnom Penh, and the group we were traveling with, and a lot of them do this now, they tried to connect with non-government organizations, so they would have them as entertainment or whatever.
Right.
And I started talking with the person on the river cruise we were on, and she told me about Daughters of Cambodia. And when
Uh,
we were doing in Phnom Penh, we could walk up the street to them. They have moved, but never would have found it again in my entire life when Bonnie and I went back there. Um, and so I went up there. My husband and I went up, and they make jewelry, and these earrings are from there.
oh,
My last
stunning.
trip, and they're all it's Daughters of Cambodia. They also have another version that are Sons of Cambodia. COVID pretty much wiped out that division.
Oh,
Um, and they had to scale back a whole lot too. But I got to know what they did. They had a sign there that said, I should have looked it up before I talked to you, said something about you can get through this.
mm,
And I took a picture of that sign and I brought it home along with money I spent there on gifts and stuff. And it just, for whatever reason, resonated with me. And I started looking into it here in Toronto. And because I'm thinking it only happens over there, right?
mm,
Big mistake.
mm.
And I somehow got to the lead sergeant for Human Trafficking Division in Toronto Police Department. And I met with Nunzio, and I learned so much. And I decided to do a breakfast. And all the people I know in my industry in the hotels and all that stuff, nobody wanted me because, hey, it's not happening here.
Uh,
Um, and a former student of mine is the event planner for one of the largest churches in Toronto. And I called Lucia, and we had it there. And I figured 25 people. We had 50 people show up.
wow.
And a couple, maybe 3 weeks later, there was something at City Hall about human trafficking. And I said, oh, well, we got to be there. We had no name, we had nothing. We came up with MPAHT. We made a sign on our own, and three of us went down there and had our picture taken with Tori, which I think is still even on our website or one of our spaces. We're looking into all that right now. And it evolved from there. And I know the first time, and it was a Hilton Hotel in downtown Toronto, where we did an event, a breakfast event, and they were so gracious in terms of sponsorship and whatnot. And we were on the reader board, which tells you what's going on in a hotel. And we'd never been on a reader board before. And I just started to cry. And somebody said, well, you took a picture, didn't you? And I went, no. But that's how it started.
Yeah.
Um,
And it's been
it
a
was,
real movement. I mean, can you tell us a little bit, bullet points of the impact you've had across Canada?
well, it's been more than across Canada.
Yes.
Um, we are pretty much known across Canada, although almost everything happens within Ontario. a blessing in disguise actually was COVID, because thanks to Robert, Navy Canada, we did a few events online, and Matt was a guest on one of them. So we became further known. I became quite known in the US. I would go down there and do things at industry events. So this was not, we did a few corporations. We would also do some hotels. And it just, I think what happened was it was almost even a trickle thing, because people would contact me that I'd never heard of. And we know that it's working.
Mm,
Um,
mm,
with COVID and everything, we've taken a huge back step. We're in the process of making some changes and whatnot right now. And we will be back stronger. We lost a lot of our volunteers through COVID, to be honest.
oh, right.
Just like a lot of groups, we are totally nonprofit. We have no government funding whatsoever. So we're all self-funded through our events and whatnot.
So what are you trying, can you explain what you're trying to change within the industry, and why it's pretty incredible that you're blazing this trail?
Awareness, awareness, and then do something. So we know, and I speak at a lot of the schools and their hospitality programs, and a lot of those students work as night front desk and so on and so forth.
Yes.
And if they see something, they're told just ignore it because it's about money.
Yes, and you don't
Um,
want to offend anyone or even have a potential lawsuit on your hands if you're making this innuendo, right?
but the other side of that is that there's more and more lawsuits coming on board now with hotels because they're not doing anything about it, particularly in the States, in the
Mm,
US.
mhm.
So it, it it's about awareness, and that's what we talk about. We know that most hotel chains, and that's where we go. I mean, we're not going to get to the mom and pop hotels. We know that.
Yeah.
That's where the laws come in, and there are laws coming down in Canada, we hope by the end of 2023. Um, that your chain says you have to do when you're onboarded, you have to do this human trafficking online thing. So you check A, B, and C, and there it's done. Don't need to worry about it anymore. Well, we come in and say, you need to worry about it. And we'll give you more. We talk about backgrounds. We talk more about, we make it real. We talk about, hey, this could be your kid. And now we've moved more into the supply chain and labor trafficking as well.
Mhm.
And we speak to industry associations like Meeting Professionals International, PCMA, Professional Convention Management Association, ADME, which is another association we have, and a whole bunch of others. But the interesting thing is that as about 3 weeks ago, a colleague of mine that I know, who's been to a couple of our events, was at a airport in Toronto, and she saw something and she thought, doesn't look right. She called the 800 number, because the first thing I tell people is put the 800 number in your phone.
Mm, mhm.
Okay. And whatever that is, wherever you're going, and we've got lists of where you can get the 800 number where you're going. This happened to be Canada. And she called them and made a report, and they didn't turn her off. They
Mm.
said, okay, we're going to open a case. And she sent me a note after, and she said, Sandy, had I not been to at least one of your sessions, I never would have thought to do this.
Wow. And what did she see exactly? Did she tell you? Can you
She
describe
said,
it?
just looked uncomfortable. It was a young person, she didn't say whether it was a male or female, who was not dressed appropriately for winter,
Oh,
um,
yeah.
and a man who didn't take his hand off of her.
Oh.
And I think, and I say this a lot, it becomes a gut reaction.
Mm,
You know what I mean? And I was very grateful to Teresa for doing what she did,
mm,
because I always finish my presentations with, if you see something, say something. We've all heard that. But I add another line. I say, you could be wrong and that's okay, but you could be right and save a life.
mm. And I've seen maybe a dozen examples over the years, but I was walking by and I didn't know that there was a number. There was no number to call. when I have
Right,
seen these
right,
incidents
right.
of younger women with much older men. Wow, that is heroic. And event planners, business event planners, wow, you have my utmost respect. I have organized some events and and ended up, pounding my head, bashing my head against a brick wall and feeling like so frazzled. Um,
Call a pro. Call a pro.
but no, back to I want to walk back to the survivors you've met, and
Yeah.
tell us about a survivor you met who left an indelible impression on you.
There's one in particular who sits on our advisory. Um, Local girl. I guess she's not a girl, I guess she's a woman now. She's,
A
um,
Canadian, a Canadian
she's
young
Canadian.
woman.
Yeah.
Mhm.
She was in high school, lived in a very well-to-do area just outside of Toronto. And she worked part-time at Tim Hortons, which is a coffee shop, which a lot of kids do when they're in high school.
Yes, yes.
And she got, this guy came up with this beautiful car and get in and all this kind of stuff. And she was taken just by that. She lived in a in a home with her family and her sister, and I think there was a brother and the dog, you
Mm,
know,
mm.
and she was being trafficked from home, and her parents didn't know for about 6 months. They saw things going weird.
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
and and it was like, okay, is this normal for a teenager? She was the oldest.
Mm,
And I've had two teenage girls, so um, and finally she told her mother, I think, and they went to the police, and she did get out. Um, and she speaks on behalf of survivors. She now works she volunteers. She has a job in a restaurant.
mm,
But she volunteers at Restoration's House, which is a home for for women who have survived trafficking. And it's a home that you don't leave in 6 months. You can stay up to 2 years and all the things that go with it, just outside of Toronto. And she has been very honest about the fact that there were times where she would just go back into it on her own without a pimp because there was something
oh,
drawing her back. Some of it was money.
mm,
And the interesting thing is that she spoke at an event with us. We had her on a panel in downtown Toronto, and we got her a complimentary room
mm.
at a very high-end hotel, and she had been trafficked out of that hotel.
Oh,
And I didn't know that until I went with her to check her in. And I said, "Do you want me to change?" And she said, "No, I can walk in with my head held high."
oh, powerful.
So that's a great story. The other one is a woman who was trafficked. When she got pregnant, she said, "I got to get the hell out of here." And she did. She's now working on her PhD, and does a lot of work with government. And I'm astounded at some of these women and what they've been through, and how they can talk about it. Because I think what most people don't understand is that it's difficult to talk about, and don't expect them all to talk about it. I'm sure you know this from your work, and Matt certainly knows this from his work.
Yes.
They say in Canada anyway, a victim who decides to testify usually tells their stories 12 times. And I'm like, that's a lot to repeat in front of strangers,
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
So I have no issues with any survivor who doesn't want to tell their story. And for God's sakes, pay them.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I
And
don't
the
even, well,
cycle
not
of
absolutely.
exploitation, right? Yeah.
Yeah, well, there's been times where we've had them speak with us on a panel. They say, "Well, we can't afford to pay them." And I said, "Well, then she's not coming." And they say, "Well, we need her, blah, blah, blah." How they either find the money or, quite frankly, we pay her.
Yes.
Um,
Thank
and
you,
I mean,
Sandy,
I
for
speak,
doing that.
well, you know what? People like me are expected to speak for free. And I've put my foot down in a lot of cases. because free doesn't pay the mortgage.
Yeah.
Let's face it.
So
But
how can, oh, go ahead. Go ahead, Sandy.
I just have a lot of respect for anybody who can come out and tell the story publicly. And the first one I told you about, she's been written up, it's a few years ago now, in a major Toronto publication
I'm very
as and
happy for
and
her.
it's a yeah, it's a great article. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's inspiring to hear how she's giving back and helping others who were in the same situation as her. Wow, Sandy, and it's all come about because you have taken a step of faith, and there was no one to pave the way for you. I mean, you basically catalyzed this movement in your industry. How can other meeting professionals, event planning professionals get involved, and in the hospitality sector as well? Can you talk a little bit about that, just so we can get the word out, and people can contact you if they know someone or if they themselves want to help?
Certainly contact me. I have no problem with that. Meeting Professionals International has a subcommittee as a task force on human trafficking. And for the first time, while it's Meeting Professionals International, coming up, I guess they've already started it in January, this subcommittee will be more international. So they will bring in members as volunteers who are international members, not just from the US. I've got a great affiliation with them. I'm no longer an MPI member for, I don't know, it just wasn't doing me anything. And I always say to my students and anyone who wants to get into the business, you got to join an association and you got to volunteer. I
Oh,
mean, I've done that that's another reason why I can connect to a lot of people, is because I've done it for 30 years. And I've been on boards and all that stuff.
yeah.
But certainly MPI, PCMA, I believe has one as well. Most of your associations that anybody in the hospitality, tourism, event planning, they all fall under all these associations. So find the one that you work with or that you're a member of. And if you're not, you should be a member of one of them, and ask the questions. If not, contact me.
Mhm.
I'm pretty well connected in the US and Canada.
Yes, and
Um,
globally, if I
and
may add.
globally.
Yes,
Yes, and globally. Yeah,
yes.
yeah,
So
yes.
Sandy, one more question before I move on to the women's movement, and some more of your thoughts on Human Trafficking Awareness Day. Yeah, how do you overcome obstacles? How do you overcome yeah, just roadblocks, or whether it's a toxic colleague or just an unforeseen situation? How would you describe that in your life? I mean, where did you develop your grit? And I mean, do you recommend that people dig within? I mean, what is it that got you to overcome?
I'm stubborn.
Okay.
And I think, you know what,
Yeah.
and when I first got into this business, I was much younger. It was about 40, well, probably 45 years ago. And I'm not a big person, and I was a lot smaller then. And I was at an MPI meeting, one of my first, and feeling very, like I don't know anybody, that whole thing. I hate those things.
And MPI
Um,
stands for, if you could share that.
sorry, meeting Professionals International.
Perfect.
So
Okay.
I was at the Toronto chapter meeting, and I hate these networking things and all that stuff. I'm actually an introvert, believe it or not.
Really?
Um,
I had no idea. I
yeah,
also have introverted tendencies. Maybe you're an ambivert where you have both,
maybe. Yeah, well,
right?
and I can be an extrovert where I have to be.
Yes, yes. I think we're similar. We both
I,
may be ambiverts where we
yeah,
have both qualities, right? Yeah.
yeah. So I was talking to this woman who was a very tall, statuesque woman. I remember she was wearing a big hat, and she was at that time one of the important people in our business.
Uh,
And she looked down on me and she said, "You will never make it in this business. You look too young and you're not very big." Boy, that was real help. I might
wow.
have been 30. at the time. And I was just, honestly, when I was 30, I was just starting my life, to be honest.
Mm.
And I'll never forget that, because a few years later, I was vice president of that association.
Yeah, you go, girl.
And it was kind of like, I'll show you. I have a lot of that in my life. I'll show you.
Did you
Um,
ever run into her again?
yeah, yeah. And as it turned out, you might want to edit this out. Her husband was a gynecologist, obstetrician. When I had my youngest daughter, I was rushed back to the hospital, and he was not mine, but he was at the hospital, and he operated on me. And I remember all in my fog, because I was scared, obviously. I remember him saying, "Well, I'm leaving on holidays. Let's get this done." And I'll never forget. And then I met his wife, and I went, no wonder. um, anyway, I think it's because I'm stubborn. I think it's because I am more cynical than I ever was, with what's going on in the world. And I when I first started MPAHT, I was going to save the whole world. And somebody I met along the way said, and this is honestly what she did, put blinders on. Where can you best serve? And I went, well, within the hospitality industry, because that's what I know. So I go all over the place, and I do a lot of mind maps, and that helps me through a lot of stuff, because I can start to pinpoint. And my mind maps are not done on a computer; they're done on full scale, on um, you know
Mm.
flip chart paper.
Right, right. And what are mind maps, if you could describe?
I just I'll get an idea in my head, and I'll say, okay, I need to get here. How do I get here? So I'll put it in a circle. I'll show you something. I did this when I first came back. Can you see it?
Oh, yes, yes,
Okay.
yes.
Actually, that's the sign that I,
Okay.
yeah. So when I came back this trip, and that's an article that I wrote, a piece that I
Oh,
wrote, I
mm,
lost it.
mm,
Anyway, I started with that. And what led me to that? So what led me to that was the sign, was this photo I took last time I was there, was this photo I took this time, and this photo I took this
mm,
time.
mm.
And what did I see in those? So that's a very personal one, but I'll take an issue and I'll say, okay, my client wants to increase numbers by 30%, and I'll put that in the center. So instead of doing it strategically, I'll do it all over the place. So how can I get there? What can I do? How does this line up, and how does that line up? Until I find my answers. Sometimes I never do.
Right.
That's
Okay. So do you see a coming women's movement, Sandy? And if so, why?
I thought that question. I think it's always been here. I think it's getting more and more important. I think we have a lot more issues in the world. When my kids were growing up, we had in Canada, it was called International, the Year of the International Woman, or something like that. And there was a big poster in red, and in the center was the words, "Why not?" in white. I had that poster,
Yes.
and I put it in the laundry room. Not today. And I did a couple marches. I think the women's movement's always been there. You go back to suffragettes.
Mm.
Um, it's changed. It's had to change. It's just I think it's more crucial. I think it's more crucial
Mm.
today than ever before. I think it encompasses so much more. When I was in my 30s, it was about being paid equally, which still we're not.
Still an issue.
That's what I'm saying. And it was about daycare. We think we're kind of on the cusp of solving that in Canada. I have a friend in Sweden, and she's just about to have her second baby. And it's like when Beatrice was, I don't know, 6 months old, and she went back to work, daycare is right there, right? Not here. It's changing. There was that same year, there was a task force on women's rights in Canada, and Lisa Laflamme did a Zoom webinar with the women who were on that task force about 6 months ago. And the one thing that the head of it, and I can't remember her name, honestly, Lisa Laflamme said to her, "So what hasn't been done?" And she's French Canadian. She goes, "Mon Dieu, we don't have daycare."
Oh.
And it was like, she's right. This was before the $10 came in, but it is getting better. But why is it taking so long? Why do we still, even though we now agree that rape is a war, a war issue, why is it still happening?
Mhm.
Why are Black women earning less than white women?
Mhm.
Why are women earning less than men?
Yeah.
Why are, there's been a lot of more violence in the world.
Mhm.
Why are women the recipient of it? Why can't women go to school? Why is there so much poverty for women? I think women were greatly affected by COVID, more so than men.
Yes, absolutely. Domestic violence spikes and divorces, also
Yeah.
affairs. More women are having affairs in Asia than ever before. Um, wow. Thank you, Sandy. And it's Human Trafficking Awareness Day today, and I honor you, Sandy,
Thank you.
for the trailblazing work, for leading women, a lot of women, but also male allies, and for changing lives, preventing uh, child exploitation and sexual exploitation in hotels. I mean, we'll never know, if someone has been saved, but it's very clear um, systemic changes are being made thanks to you and your awareness raising. Is there anything you want to add about the fight against human trafficking to our audience?
Know what your kids are doing on social media, please. And don't for a minute think your kids are exempt from it. And I think we have to start there. I think we have to get it in the schools more than we are. I think there needs to be laws passed to make it mandatory in all of our public spaces, whether they're hotels, convention centers, airports, whatever. I think we have to do that. And it's a big job. I think everybody can do one little part. I mean, it's the butterfly effect, right?
Yes,
You
yes.
know, um, and I think we can. I know the numbers are rising, but I think little by little we can do it. Not in my lifetime, maybe in yours. You're younger than me.
Absolutely. And I love that quote, the why not. It reminds me of the George Bernard Shaw quote, that you see things and you ask why, and I see things that never were and I say why not. And
Perfect.
that is, yeah, thank you. You encapsulate that, Sandy. You're a legend in the industry, in networks of MPHT. If you are interested in joining Meeting Professionals Against Human Trafficking, or finding out more about Sandy's work and her heart for mentorship, please reach out to her directly on LinkedIn. And I want to thank you for being with us today, and I hope you have a great evening. Thank you. And
Thank
thank you,
you.
Sandy, for everything and for all your love, your support, and yeah, it's just been amazing to know you. Thank you.
Thank you, Sylvia. Thank you.